Hello, hello, hello. It's the Ecom Dispensary. It's your boy Nate Schmidt here with the man Scotty. Final episode this week, folks. Episode number 148. And this one we're talking about the power of intentional practice. You got something to say there, Scotty?
We're talking about golf.
We are talking about golf. We are talking about golf. I got to brag a little bit. It's just funny. This is just like another, kind of lesson that I've learned, or that I was kind of reminded of through the game of golf, that also very much applies to business. It's pretty funny just how like universal things are. Like everything's the same. What works in one thing works in everything. So I think this is a really important concept for, especially if you're just like in that stage of things with ecom where you're testing different products, testing different stores. Maybe you're making some sales, but you're just not getting to the point where any of them are like showing a lot of promise or being super profitable. And you just kind of feel like you're just kind of stagnating. I think what we're about to go over can definitely help you get out of that. There's a specific thing that I highly recommend that you do that I think is, this is, I would say one of the key things that I did when I was first starting out that really, really helped me out. And I think it allowed me to have a lot less failed stores than average before I found my first winner. So let's talk about it. So this episode inspired by my golf game, sponsored by Nate Schmidt's golf game. Basically the past few months, in case you guys didn't know, I got really into golf like at the beginning of last year, about a year and a half ago, when quarantine hit and golf courses were like the only thing open. I started playing golf and got really into it. It's become like my absolute favorite thing. I absolutely love playing golf now. Been playing a lot, been practicing a lot. And the past few months up until recently, I'd say like my progress was kind of stagnating. The thing that I really love about golf is there's so much room for improvement and it's so difficult to get to a really high level. Cause there's just, it's hard, man. Like golf is hard. And I really love investing my time into things that have like I don't even know if you call it a steep learning curve, but that have like a long road to mastery. Because if you can just do something and get good at it really quickly, then it's just like, it's not as fun. I think it's more fun when things are difficult, when things take longer. So I've been trying to get better at golf. Obviously, I think my goal is to kind of just get to the point where I'm like a scratch golfer. I don't know if I have aspirations much further beyond that. I don't think I'm probably ever going to make it to the PGA Tour or anything. But
Okay, that sounded very differently 3-4 months ago. What happened to Schmidt?
I've had some, as I've progressed, I've realized that there's just a huge difference between a pro golfer and someone who's like actually really good at golf. It's just a completely different level. These guys that are on the PGA Tour, they've been playing golf since they were 3 years old. They've been doing it every single day for 20 plus years. And,
And
is it
then they're
possible? Maybe. But, I don't think that's going to happen. I just like to get to the point where I'm a scratch golfer. But anyways, past few months, it really felt like my progress was stagnating. I was kind of just stuck shooting in like the low to mid 80s for a really long time. Like I had this breakthrough to get to that point, and then I was just kind of stuck there, that plateau, for a really long time. And that was the case. I was practicing more than ever. I was going to the range a lot, playing a lot, and my scores were just not going down, and it was really frustrating. And then recently, within like the past week or two, I had a sort of breakthrough, and the last like 3 rounds that I've had have all in a row been like personal best, just each round getting better than the other. I'm finally shooting in the 70s, and it's been really rewarding. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like it feels really good to like be breaking, my own personal records and stuff. But the kind of the main reason that this happened is, at least in my opinion, because I started being a lot more intentional with the way that I practiced and the way that I played and the way that I kept track of things. So I wrote an email about this earlier this week that you guys may have seen. But I started tracking all of my main stats from each round I played. So there's like 3 main things in golf. There's, how many fairways you hit, how many greens in regulation you hit, and how many putts it takes you to get around the course. So I started keeping track of all these things, how many fairways I was hitting, how many greens in regulation, how many putts. And each round I was able to see what part of my game was struggling and where I was losing the majority of my strokes. So, if I went out and I was just not hitting a lot of greens in regulation, that was kind of like the main thing that I think I really improved on. Then I knew that I needed to work on my irons. I needed to work on hitting them straight, hitting them where I was aiming, and just hitting them well. So basically, because I started tracking what I was doing and what I needed to work on, I was able to, in my practice, like, whereas before I was just kind of going to the range and just hitting balls, like just not really doing it with a whole lot of intention. I started going with the intention of, okay, so today I need to work on hitting my irons straight, hitting my wedges straight. So I'd pick out a target and I would just go through my irons and I'd really try to make a focus on just hitting it where I was aiming instead of just hitting it willy-nilly and just being like, whatever. And through the process of doing that over a couple of weeks, I was able to really improve my golf swing, improve my game. I tried out some new things in my swing that ended up working, and I was able to get a lot more consistent. And then, that all kind of ended up with me kind of breaking through the plateau that I was at into a new plateau, I guess you would say. So that's about the story with golf. How this applies to business, I think, especially with ecom, the way that most people do things is, they come up with an idea for a store or product, they throw it up on Shopify, get some ads up, test it, and if it doesn't work, they're just like, oh, well, okay, whatever. That didn't work. And then they're just kind of on to the next thing, essentially going back to square one from that failure, whatever didn't work. What I think is really, really important to do when you're testing products is everything that you test, every store that you run, keep a log of what you did and what the results were, and then try to analyze why you think what you did didn't work. This isn't going to be a perfect process. With golf, it's a little bit cleaner because you could just keep track of your stats and it's much more cut and dry. With this, you have to kind of use your brain a little bit more, and you have to do a little bit of guesswork, I would say, because you're not going to know 100% of the time this didn't work because of XYZ. But over time, if you keep testing a lot of stuff and you keep a log of what works for you and what doesn't, say, okay, so I tested this ad in this style, that didn't work, but I tested this other ad in this other style and that worked better. Now, are there other factors that go into it? Absolutely. Just because one ad outperformed another ad doesn't mean that like that style of ad is the only ad that you should be running. But you kind of get what I'm going for here. Most people just throw up stores, they test products, and then they're just like, okay, whatever. Every time that you test a store, every time that you test a product, you should be keeping a log of what you're doing and then taking notes about why you think what you're doing is working and what's not. And the way that I like to think about this is like every dollar that you spend on ads should be a lesson learned. Maybe not every dollar. If you spend $160, maybe you don't need 160 different lessons. But every dollar that you spend on ads, it should be a learning experience. And this is kind of how you get better at ecom, is by testing things that don't work. And the way that I like to think of it is you're not so much trying to find what does work. You're just trying to test a lot of stuff to eliminate what doesn't. And then over time, you will eventually figure out what does work just through the process of elimination.
That's an interesting take for sure. As you were talking there, I thought of maybe a different way of applying it to ecom, where if you're trying to learn at ecom, you're starting from scratch. Instead of trying to learn ecom, break ecom down into its components and focus on learning the components. And I don't think you can learn ecom. Ecom is not a skill. Ecom is a collection of skills. Ecom is a business model that requires many different skills. So if you go into it and you're like, okay, I'm going to focus on learning copy for a month. And you figure out, okay, how am I going to learn copy? And then you make a plan for that. Plan might be, I'm going to hand copy sales letters. I'm going to write ads every day. And I'm going to study the top ads on Facebook by X, Y, and Z company. That would be your month where you study copy. After that, you might be like, okay, now I'm going to learn how to make really good video ads. And then you're like, okay, what's my plan for how to get good at video ads? I'm going to scroll through Facebook. I'm going to find good video ads. I'm going to download them, save them in a file, and then I'm going to really study them. Like, what are they doing in the first 3 seconds? Again, you could even break down the skill of video ads into analyzing the content, analyzing the editing, analyzing the text on them, figuring out, okay, how do they hook people's attention? All these are individual skills that, again, you can break down and just hone in. Don't try to get good at video ads, but first study how do they catch attention in the first 5 seconds? And then all you're looking at is those first 5 seconds. And you're trying to really break it down, really think about it. And I think anyone that actually does this and breaks down e-com into its component skills, break them down further, and then really dive deep into each individual part of a video ad, for example, or in copy, dive deep into headlines or bullet writing or whatever. I think without a course, without anyone helping you, without a mentor, you're going to learn a lot. Just because you can look at a video ad and say, oh, this is a good video ad, but you're not really learning anything from it. Whereas if you dive really deep into one individual part, you're going to see stuff that you would have just glanced over because you're looking at those first 5 seconds 100 times. And you're doing that intentionally in a very focused way.
I like that interpretation as well. I like that as well. Yeah, I mean, I think ideally you're doing both. Like you're breaking things down. And I think that's a really key point too, is that e-com is not a skill, it's a collection of skills. And you need to be at bare minimum decent at, all of those different skills that e-com entails. But you just like, the thing that I was really trying to get at is just that e-com is one of those things where you're going to try a lot of things and a lot of things are not going to work. And none of those things that don't work should go to waste. Everything that doesn't work, they say like there's no such thing as wins and losses. There's wins and then there's lessons, I think that's kind of the mindset that you have to take, because it can get really frustrating and really like just kind of disappointing when you're spending money, you put all this work into something that you think might work and it just doesn't work. And it can be really frustrating and it can discourage you from wanting to try it again. But if you kind of go at it with the intention of learning as much as you can from each of these failed ventures, you're going to learn a lot. And I think that's, you can learn a lot from studying successful things, kind of like Scotty was saying, studying video ads and studying copywriting and all these things. But I think the real sauce is like just putting offers out and seeing what works and what doesn't in the real world, and then keeping track of those things and being able to refer back to that, so that ultimately, I mean, I think a big part of it is you just don't want to make the same mistakes twice. If you do something that doesn't work, you don't want to do that same thing again, because you've already found out that doesn't work. And if you just keep doing that and you keep track of all the things that you've been testing, you'll eventually, through the process of elimination, you'll stumble upon things that do work. And it's really just about finding that kind of combination of those things that do work well enough for you to have a profitable store.
Yes, sir. Así es.
So essentially, folks, be intentional with your practice, with testing products. Don't just throw things up willy-nilly. Actually keep track of what you're doing. Keep a log. I mean, that's like the actionable advice from this episode is keep a log. Just make it can be a simple Google Doc, and just keep track of what you're testing. And then do your best to draw conclusions about why you think the things that you tested didn't work. And then some things will work. You'll run one type of ad and maybe it performs a lot better. Try that kind of same style of ad again on the next store that you test, and test out your, what you think works and what doesn't. Like, test that out again and see if that confirms your suspicion or not. And you just keep doing that and you keep track of things. And it's really tough over a long enough period of time to fail. If you really keep track of these things, you're really acting with a lot of intention and just like actually thinking about what you're doing instead of just like mindlessly throwing up stores like most people do.
I think the real lesson from this episode is what I said, but to each their own.
I think that's a good lesson too. Break things down into more specific parts and just focus on getting good at the skills that underpin ecom. I mean, that's really like, that's the lesson that we're always talking about,
Yep, 100%. I just think the further you break it down, the more you'll actually get, like, go deep on something. and then move on to the next thing. Instead of trying to learn copywriting, focus on headline writing, focus on bullet point writing, or whatever. Focus on the hook, just the hook, and all you're studying is the hook, and all you're writing is hooks. I think you're going to get a lot better than if you just say, "Hey, I'm going to study copywriting." Especially if you don't have a mentor or someone helping you. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you're tackling a huge skill. The more you break it down, I think the more you can self-study effectively.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I think that's also great advice. Really a 2-for-1 in this episode here. Y'all are very welcome. My throat is getting all scratchy. The water's saving me. Yeah, I think that's the gist. You got anything else you want to add on this one, Scott, man?
I do not. I think that's it. I think that's it for this week.
All right, folks. Well, we hope you enjoyed this week's episodes, this week's knowledge droppage. Definitely heed some of these words. I think there's some words of wisdom in here. I think you do some good to heed these words, apply them to your own life, see what you can do with this kind of information. And yeah, I think that'll about do it. Y'all have a great rest of your weekend, night, morning, early afternoon, whenever it is that you're listening / watching this. Make it a great one. You know what? Matter of fact, make it a powerful one, folks. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Peace.